John chapter 21, we are going to start where we started last week at verse 15 and read through the end of the book. I'm reading from the English Standard Version. John chapter 21, it is on the screen if you want to follow along up there. When they had breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." He said to him, "Feed my lambs." He said to him a second time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." He said to him, "Tend my sheep." Verse 17, he said to him the third time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time, "Do you love me?" And he said to him, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my sheep. Truly, truly, I say to you, when you were young, you used to dress yourself and walk wherever you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and another will dress you and carry you where you do not want to go." This he said to show by what kind of death it was to glorify God. And after saying this, he said to him, "Follow me." Peter turned and saw the disciple whom Jesus loved following them. The one who also had leaned back against him during the supper and had said, "Lord, who is it that is going to betray you?" When Peter saw him, he said to Jesus, "Lord, what about this man?" Jesus said to him, "If it is my will that he remain until I come, what is that to you? You follow me." So the saying spread among the brothers that this disciple was not to die. Yet Jesus did not say to him that he was not to die, but, "If it is my will that he remain until I come, what is that to you?" This is the disciple who is bearing witness about these things, and who has written these things, and we know that his testimony is true. Verse 25. Now there are also many other things that Jesus did, were every one of them to be written. I suppose that the world itself could not contain the books that would be written. Someone pointed out to me this morning that 3 years ago to this week, we began the study of John, 2014, the first week of June. We opened up John 1 verse 1, and we began a journey to discover the gospel as John has revealed it in his gospel, the true gospel, the gospel of Jesus Christ in you. We engaged that journey at a level that was much deeper than many of you have ever heard or realized, including myself. But it was not man-made words. It was not the wisdom of man, but it was the wisdom of God as it was displayed through the Gospel of John. If you have just began this journey with us, what I've done is on our webpage, I put a sermon tab under ministries, and I have broken every sermon down by verse. So all after this week, as this is our last week in John, you could access any sermon by the verse. If you would like to go back and see what the studies were about. But we end today. We end quite the journey, for me at least, as a young pastor. 2014, our Midtown was a family that was 2 years young in the making. And I made a decision. God led me to bring you through the Gospel of John so we had a strong foundation to stand on. Not us as a church, as a corporation, a nonprofit, but you and me as a church family. What is the gospel? And how is the gospel worked out in you? Where does it begin and where does it end? Well, it begins with the one who is the Word, the one who is the truth, the one who is the life, the one who became flesh and dwelt among us. And John 1 verse 14 makes it very clear, this is nothing that you have done. Nothing that you can do. Not the will of man, not the will of flesh, but the will of God Himself in you. And it makes people squirm, and it makes people they don't know what to do because they want to do. They want to help. And for 3 years, you have heard the real gospel of Jesus Christ. And you've heard about your new birth, your second self, your real self, the life within you. You have learned that this flesh is meant for destruction one day, to be redeemed and to be resurrected in a new body. This flesh is a tool to bring the new you into glory and into eternity. But I got to ask this question. Why does John end with this? I mean, okay, guys, just think about this for a moment. Matthew 28, we have, how does Matthew end? The Great Commission. Right? Go and make disciples, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them. I mean, why does John end with an obscure story about a man who it appears the gospel does not work in him? John leaves you hanging with a man named Peter who is struggling to follow Jesus, the very basics of the behavior of the new self. Why does John end with this? It doesn't make for a good ending. It doesn't make for a good novel. It's not romantic. It's just almost a dud. Well, the man who the church should have been built upon, here he is. He's still worried and concerned about other people at the end of the story. Did John chapter 1 through 20 not work? Because if you were reading John 1 through 20, you could begin to form an opinion about how you ought to behave, how you ought to look, because you have a new life. You have a new birth. The Spirit of God is in you, therefore I should be different. But if you sat down and you read John chapter 1 through 20 in the 2 hours that it could take to read it, not 3 years, it could take you 2 hours to get through the book, you may very well be the same person where you started 2 hours earlier. Is it possible that John ends with Peter to show you a man who the journey is just beginning? He's the same Peter he was 3 years ago. It just seems like it falls flat. I mean, I've heard, and you probably have heard many great sermons on the Great Commission. Go and make disciples. Don't miss it. John is not, he does not stand in contrast to Matthew. The Great Commission is in there. Tend, feed my sheep, tend my sheep, feed my lambs. It's there. But I believe John's Great Commission is even greater. Because before you go make disciples, there's one other person you need to be concerned about. And it's yourself. It's yourself. The burden of making disciples has been placed upon the church for too long without the Great Commission of you, yourself, and God. You follow Him. You follow Him. This is about you. It begins with the work of God in you. And Peter's greatest distraction was others, the love of others. Let's just go back and start where we started last week. When they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, you got to love the fact, all right, we talked about discipline last week. We talked about God afflicting His children. We talked about how that is love, even though it may not feel as if it's love in the moment. And Jesus, he lets Peter finish his breakfast, and he engages with Peter in discipline. He is getting ready to afflict Peter with pain to teach him a lesson. Your pain has purpose. I think the question, where does my pain come from, is simply a distraction of something so much greater. Now, there is a sovereign God in control of all, and he can even use pain and suffering to draw you closer. Simon, son of John. Now, you got to get the first question. You missed the first question, you missed the whole thing. This question is not like the other two. Do you love me more than these? That's where Jesus starts. Do you love me more than these? Peter, do you love me more than these? Who are the these? It is his friend sitting right next to him. Do you love Jesus more than the person you're sitting next to? This was Peter's problem. He loved the opinion of a servant girl over the opinion of Jesus. And Jesus, that goes to the core issue here. Peter, you have not repented. You have not turned from the world. Do you love me more than these guys sitting next to me? Do you love me more than your friends? Do you love me more than anything in this world? And Peter answers, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Well, first off, this question isn't for the Lord. It's for Peter. And second of all, he missed it. No, he doesn't. No, he doesn't. I mean, we know what to say, but if let's just be honest and real for a moment, he does not. The servant girl's opinion of him was more important and more valuable than the Lord's opinion sitting in the room right next to him. But he knows what to say, and he's not trying to fake Jesus out. He really believes he does. But Jesus knows his heart. He does not. And so Jesus asked him this question. It's a question that should be asked to you. Do you love me more than these? And he doesn't. This is why Jesus asked him. Because Peter needs to start hearing himself say, yes, he does. Peter needs to start telling him what he needs to know. But at this point, a servant girl who he's never met before was her opinions, thoughts about Peter was more valuable than the thoughts of Jesus. So he doesn't. But Jesus engages him at a deep level. Jesus engages you. Sometimes your intellect knows what to say. You know the right answer. But we're not here yet. And that's okay. Because Jesus is going to get Peter there. But not in the Gospel of John. He will not. He will not get there by the end of today. The end of this story. You know that I love you. Peter deflects to Jesus because the weight and the burden of the words are too much to just simply say yes. You know what it's like. You put in the spotlight, you can't bear to hear the words, so you quickly turn it back around. You get it off you. The burden's too much. You can't sit under the weight of the words. And he puts it right back on Jesus. Jesus, feed my lambs. Feed my lambs. Is it possible that servant girl was simply asking Peter, do you belong to him? Because she was watching a righteous man be persecuted, and she did not know what to do with it. She did not know how to handle it. Finally, someone who has been with that guy can give me some answers. Oh, of course. She was sent to go retrieve Peter, to go bring him in. But is it possible, as a young lady, she was struggling with what was going on in the moment? But Peter's value of her opinion blinded him. So the second question is different. He said to him a second time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Let's get rid of everyone else and let's just you and me. Do you love me? Do you love Jesus? Do you love Jesus? We talked about the Greek briefly, and I said, we're not really going to go there. They're speaking in Aramaic. John records this in Greek. It's too ambiguous to form a message and deliver it to you. But I encourage you, go home and research it, because the words agapos and philos and the bouncing around, I think there's something there, but it's not conclusive enough to bring it to you. And that's not the point. The point is what Jesus is doing in Peter's life and what he's doing in your life. Simon, son of John, forget everyone else, Simon. Do you love me? He's not asking because he doesn't know. He knows Peter's heart. He's asking because Peter doesn't know. You know you love him. But down here, the guilt says something else. I don't know where we stand. The shame says something else. The darkness says something else. Up here, we know what to say, but it has not penetrated down here. This is what I believe Jesus is doing in Peter. Let's just begin saying the right things. Let's begin hearing it out loud. Let's begin working the basics of the gospel. Do you love him? Yes, Lord. You know that I love you. Deflects it again. He can't bear to hear these words. He said to him, tend my sheep. Tend my sheep. Verse 17, he said to him the third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Now he switches that Greek verb right there from agapos to philos, because Peter's been responding with philos, as John records it. So it's interesting, but he says to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And Peter was grieved. Don't you miss this word this morning. Don't you miss that word grieved. That is everything to Peter. It is that word that shapes and sculpts Peter. It is that word that develops hope. It is that word that brings you peace. It is that word that establishes you in faith. He was grieved, and don't be fooled. He was grieved by the hand of God. Jesus' words grieved him. Jesus' words caused him emotional pain. Why? Because he said to him a third time, do you love me? Jesus is pushing Peter to be open to hear the words of the gospel. And he's not sugarcoating it. His words will have an impact, even if it causes pain. And some of you, all of you, you know what it's like to be afflicted by the Lord. You have deferred it to darkness, to the evil one, and in doing so, it's possible you have missed the whole point in it. Follow me. Follow me. Do you love me? He said a third time. Peter's grieved. And he said to him, Lord, maybe exasperated, but John knows Peter's grieved because his tone changes. Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. But he's still not getting it, and that's okay. But John's showing you something in Peter, and this is how he wants his gospel to end, because you need to see this. You have to see this work out in Peter so you can see it in your life. Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. Jesus said to him, feed my sheep. And now it's time to teach you. Finally, Peter, you're open. That point of being grieved, here comes the lesson that will now begin to stick in Peter's life. Truly, Peter, you got to listen to me, Peter. Peter, you need to hear this. When you were young, you used to dress yourself and walk wherever you wanted. Let me put this in different terms. When you were young, you did what you wanted. You lived in rebellion. You went astray. You followed yourself. You followed yourself, Peter. And we all do. When we are young, this is what we know is to follow ourselves, our flesh, what our desires and passions and lusts are. You know nothing else. What is it to me to come at you and fix what you are following? Because it's simply a symptom of something much deeper. It's the result, the behavior of something you value, a belief system. And Jesus calls it out on when you were young. 2.5 weeks ago, Peter, you denied me because it felt right in the moment. 2.5 weeks ago, Peter, you ran away from me because it felt right. You did what you wanted. Peter, in his answer in verse 17, is probably going on through his mind. I did not want to deny you. It was not what I wanted to do. I don't know why I did it. Jesus, I am sorry. I don't know what has happened in me. This is not the man I want to be. I want to be different. I want to be new. I want to follow you without any reservations, without the concern of what women think, men think, my friends think. I want to follow you. I want to love you. But he's not there yet. And Jesus is revealing light into the darkness. And if it's going on in your life, if anything, this morning, I hope you just become aware of the fact that God is calling your name. And He will spare nothing to do so. Even His Son on the cross. How much more your own flesh? But look at this. How nice would it be to have a picture of the end of your life to see where you would end up? But when you are old, Peter, listen to me. When you are old, you will be stretched. Your hand. You will stretch out your hands, and another will dress you, and carry you where you do not want to go. Verse 19, this he said to show by what kind of death he was to glorify God. What is going on? Jesus looks at Peter and goes, guys, reading between the lines, Peter, don't worry about what you did when you were young. Because this is where you're going to end up. You will get to a point in life where people will look you in the eyes and say, deny him or die. And you will die. Because you'll be so established in your faith because of what I will do in you. You will not deny me anymore. My gospel, my work in you will be completed to perfection. Peter, you're just beginning the journey. Peter, I'm not done with you yet. And he said to him, follow me. This is what you need to know, Peter. Church, at the end of John, this is what you need to know. Follow Jesus. Follow him. Follow him. In verse 20, why does John end with this? Do you see the irony? Peter turned and saw the disciple whom Jesus loved following them. Jesus doesn't finish saying, follow me, before Peter turns away again. You may not think this is big, but Peter continues to live in the same habits. He becomes concerned about the man behind him instead of the man next to him. Peter turned. A play of words, I don't know. But we are to turn to Jesus and follow him. And Peter turns away in the very moment, the command to follow me, and looks at the guy behind him. And what is his concern? Well, John lets you know that this is him. This is John, the gospel writer, that is in this mix now. The one who has also leaned back against him during the supper and had said, Lord, who is it that is going to betray you? So Peter turns around, and there's John following them. And what does Peter do? Well, he does what he's been doing his whole life. He becomes distracted. When Peter saw him, he said to Jesus, Lord, what about this man? Now, what does Jesus say? How does he respond to this? Jesus said to him, if it is my will, which that statement in of itself, guys, is a powerhouse. Jesus declares, if this is what I choose to do with him because I am God, so be it. If it is my will, if it is up to me, and I choose that he remains until I come, what is that to you? What is it to you, Peter? You follow me. The Great Commission of John is you follow Jesus. The distraction of others and what God is doing in their life can be so great to pull you away from what God is doing in you. You follow Jesus. You follow Jesus. Verse 23. So the saying spread among the brothers that this disciple was not to die. The question's still spiraling. Why is John ending on this? Yet Jesus did not say to him that he was not to die, but if it is my will that he remain until I come, what is that to you? Do you see? Who told the disciples that he wasn't going to die? My hunch is Peter. I've seen Peter for several chapters now. Someone spread the word, the false word, that John would never die. And it appears that at this point in the conversation that Jesus is talking to Peter and Peter to Jesus. The picture is a man who is stuck, but he will not be stuck forever. God is working in him, working through him. And he will perfect him. He will perfect you. He will have his purpose in you. And all things in your life are working for that good. To fulfill his will and his purpose in your life. Do not be distracted by what God is doing in others. Start with yourself. Start with knowing that he cares enough about you to slow you down so you can begin to see his work. We leave Peter, where a lot of you are. You can't move forward in your relationship with God, no matter what energy you exert. It seems to aid nothing in your maturity. I want you to do something. John says there's so much more that could be said. But I choose to end here. John says, so much great stuff to be written down, but I'm going to choose to end with a man who appears, his story appears to have the gospel failing in his life. It doesn't seem to be working in Peter. And there have been plenty of times in my life where I've wondered the same thing. What will it look like the moments I die? Is it working? My concern should be for me to follow him. Your concern should be for you to follow him. The Great Commission is there. Tend and care and feed the children of the Lord, the people of this world. Love them as Jesus would love them. Care about them. But do not get distracted by what God is doing in their life. Be concerned about yourself. So, just real quick, just exercise you all can participate in. What do you know of Peter up to this point? I mean, what do we know of Peter? He tried to walk on water, but wasn't successful because he feared the waves. The transfiguration happened. He was there, and he kind of just got all jumbled up. And so he said, let's build some tents for you, Jesus, Moses, and that other guy. He pulled out a sword to cut off, to start killing the people who were going to arrest Jesus, and cuts off the ear of the high priest. He tells Jesus, you will not die. I will, and Jesus looks at him and says, Satan, get behind me. I mean, what do we know of Peter? And if you were to pick 4 adjectives to define Peter up to this point, what 4 would you pick? Just take a moment, write them down, talk to the person next to you, and pick 4 adjectives that describes this man and how you know him as he's been presented up to this point in his life. I'll give you 20 seconds. What you got? Impulsive. What else you got? Entitled. What else you got? Protector. What else you got? Impulsive. What else you got? Wants to be in control. What else you got? Weakness. I heard young. Anything else? Keep going. No right or wrong answers. I'm just curious how you see this guy. Confused. Okay? Passionate. Okay? Sounds like you're describing my life. I said, Peter! I've got 4 words also. My first one is young. I know a lot of, look, my words aren't biblical. I've done the same thing you did. I put them on slides. Doesn't make them any greater than yours. He sounds a lot like me, though. Young. I had a situation cutting grass this week. It's not happened in a while. And I've got to encounter my old self and my new self. As I pulled up to a yard at 7:30 in the morning, I know the 7, 8 o'clock hour is a rough hour for, you just never know what's going on inside. Work's gotta get done. Well, so we fire up the weed eaters, whatever, come around the house, and the guy comes out. Basically, just put it mildly, goes, do you want to die? And then you can use, every word I should not use up here. And so I was with a guy who his initial response was, Greg, he wants to fight. Those are fighting words. And I felt it in me. He wanted to engage because I was weed eating his yard at 7:30 in the morning. And there was a gut reaction to want to engage him at his level. Young. I put unstable. You just don't know what the guy's going to do. Right? Is he going to pull out a sword or is he going to deny Jesus? It just doesn't seem stable. Irrational. As he think through this stuff? Is he contemplating the end result of pulling a sword out? Fearful. Now, we saw this in the walking on water, but guys, honestly though, you see it right here in this conversation on the beach. He's fearful of God's opinion of him, of Jesus' opinion of him. He's trying to convince Jesus, I do love you. You know this. Fearful man. Let's go to 1 Peter. Let's fast forward in Peter's life. We have very little of what's going on between outside of some stuff in Acts. And I want you, I'm gonna put your brain at work because I'm gonna do 2 things because of time. We're gonna run over, but hey, the benefit is we're closing out John. I'm gonna do 2 things with you. I'm gonna take 1 Peter 1 through 9, and I'm gonna change all pronouns to be you. First person pronoun. So this is talking about you. The second thing that needs to go on your head as you read this in your first person pronouns, this is me, about me, is you've got to consider Peter where he was 20 years ago. Or 10 years ago, 15 years ago, before his earlier life. Okay? Up for the challenge? I think you are. Peter, put your name. Greg, put your name. An apostle of Jesus Christ. Some of you won't even go beyond that. You will not think, I use these words carefully, but I'll use them, highly of yourself. You will not view yourself through the eyes of God. Peter knew who he was. He knew his call, and he labeled it. Greg, a child of God. Greg, a preacher for Christ. Put in your name. Put son or daughter of Jesus Christ. Son or daughter of the Father. Remember the man we're leaving on the beach? Unstable, young, irrational, confused, passionate. These are his words, okay? God is working in him to write this down to tend and feed you. According to the foreknowledge of God the Father, in the sanctification of the Spirit, for obedience to Jesus Christ and for sprinkling with his blood, may grace and peace be multiplied to me. Peter had to come to this realization. These words were for those he was writing to, those being under severe persecution, but he had to come to this knowledge for himself. Blessed be the God and Father of my Lord Jesus Christ, according to his great mercy. He has caused me to be born again to a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, to an inheritance that is imperishable, undefiled, and unfading, kept in heaven for me, who by God's power, you see where Peter has arrived? Look at what God is doing in me. Look at what God is doing in you. It starts with me and my relationship with God, who by God's power and being guarded through faith for a salvation ready to be revealed in the last time. In this I rejoice, though now for a little while, if necessary, I have been grieved by various trials. The root of this word grieved is the same root John uses. Is Peter going back to the beach scene? Is this the trial he's talking about? In other words, it was necessary for the Lord to grieve me to get to this point. So that the tested genuineness of my faith, which he was not aware of on that beach, more precious than gold, that perishes though it is tested by fire, may be found to result in praise and glory and honor at the revelation of Jesus Christ. Though I have not seen him, should be I love him. Though I do not now see him, I believe in him and rejoice with joy that is inexpressible and filled with glory, obtaining the outcome of my faith. Now, this would say your faith as he's writing to you, but switching is my faith. This is mine. My faith. Taking ownership. I am following Jesus. I am trusting in him. I am believing him. This is my faith. That is more precious to me than gold. More precious to me than these buddies sitting with me on the beach. This is mine. It's the salvation of my soul. Peter wrote that. Hey, your impulsive, irrational, young, confused man who's full of fear wrote those words by the power of God in him. His journey was just beginning on that beach. His story just beginning. That's 4 words that describe Peter based upon those 9 verses. The man you hear coming through those pages. Go ahead. Take 20 seconds. And come up with 4 more adjectives that now define this man as who he appears to be in his writing to you. Go ahead. 4 adjectives. I know this is a little bit more tricky, but you can do it. So it's a very interesting, a lot more communication with the first go-around. Because I think we all can relate to the young Peter. Is it possible that's where we are finding ourselves over and over and over again? On that beach, stuck in the same cycles, wondering, does he love me? Do I love him? Yet we can say it up here, but not established in here. Because this go-around, and it's no shame, this was much more hard. It was harder for me this go-around than it was the first to identify the man who was writing these words. Here's what I've got. A man who's sound. He knows what he knows. And he knows the Lord has grounded him and has caused him to become his child. He's faithful. The guy has not swerved away from God. He is living in his faith. His faith. Reading 1 Peter 1, just that little section, he's a guy I would want to sit with and just pick his brain. Tell him the struggles of my life. Tell me, Peter, what do I do? The guy on the beach, no. This guy, absolutely. And to be honest, he doesn't sound like a guy who would pull out a sword anymore. He sounds compassionate. He sounds merciful. In other words, Jesus done a whooping good job in his life. Jesus perfected him. It was a promise given to Peter, and it has been fulfilled. And you see it. John leaves you with the beginning of his story. John leaves you with the beginning of your story. The beginning of your journey, which begins with you following him. It does not begin with you going to Judea and the uttermost parts of the earth. It begins with you following him. Let's close with what Sarah read earlier. Jeremiah 29. This is the way God operates. What you're seeing in Peter's life, you will see throughout the Old Testament. This is God and the way God operates. He does not change. For thus says Yahweh, the Lord. When 70 years are completed, what were the 70 years for? Exile. Because they wandered away. Israel lost its way. And he tossed them into exile. God, the Lord, brought them into exile. He afflicted his chosen nation. He says, I will visit you. And I will fulfill to you my promise and bring you back to this place. Verse 11, for I know the plans. You may not know, but I know them. You may not have that Peter moment of seeing the end of your life, but God does. I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans for welfare, not for evil. Plans for righteousness, not unrighteousness. Plans to call you out of darkness, not to drive you into evil and the darkness. To give you a future and a hope. To give you new life. And to give you hope that is, as Peter says, a living hope. Then Peter will follow. Then you will call upon me. Then you will come and pray to me, and I will hear you. You will seek me, and you will find me. When you seek me with all of your heart, don't be distracted by the people on the beach with you. You follow me. I will be found by you, declares the Lord. I will restore your fortunes. I will gather you from all the nations. We will go back to that garden together. Together we will live in paradise. Together we will be restored. Our relationship will be made whole again. The fortune isn't in the riches of the world. The fortune is in the relationship with Yahweh, sitting on a beach, making breakfast with you. A relationship with God Almighty, the maker of the heavens and the earth, who longs to be with people who will follow him. And these people are just like you and me, broken and messed up, but in here, made new by the power of God. People like Peter, who don't get it yet. They know it here, they just don't get it. But Jesus longs for Peter to be behind him and be besides him. Jesus longs for him. And all the places where I have driven you, because you long to go astray, but I would not allow it in your life. I will drive you to places that will awaken your soul, declares the Lord, Yahweh, the maker of the heavens and the earth, Yeshua, God Almighty. And I will bring you back to the place from which I sent you into exile. He will do it. Church, you are here because you believe there is a God. and you believe that he had a son named Jesus Christ who came to this earth in the form of man to give himself of you. You sit here week after week because you know it's true. There's nothing more of you that is needed. Believe that he will work and cast your eyes upon him. Do not be distracted with the person next to you, behind you, your neighbor. This is about you, yourself, and God. This is the Gospel of John, restoring your broken relationship with God. Not the person next to you, and not the person you not met. This is about you. And when he's good and ready, he will drive you out to go tend to his sheep and to teach them the good news. But he's a God who cares about you. Praise be to God. And we, this morning, get to sing and pronounce and claim that I get to exalt him. In my brokenness, the guy wanting to beat me up because I'm at his yard 7:30 in the morning. You know what really bothered me? He told me to grow a freaking brain. I don't know. I mean, I was all right until that point. But then I just walked away. The guy with me, how are you so calm? Well, in here I'm really not. But I've been afflicted. I've been grieved. His misery is not my misery. He's doing what he knows. He's doing what he has been taught. And I have been taught other. And you have been too. You follow him. Father God, I praise you that you have called us broken people out of darkness into light. And yet, even in the light, there we appear to be broken still. And yet, you're not done. There's no fast forward button on my life and in the lives of those here. You will do what you do in your time. And God, it's even possible for us to be distracted with what you're doing in our lives. We're so in a hurry to get there that we miss the journey, the walks on the beach. Well, Father, the church this morning, those in front of me and those who were just not able to be here, I pray that we learned a lesson from John, that you caused this new birth. I didn't, you did. What I need to do is trust that you will finish it. And it's so hard because I can be an angry person. I can be a person full of hate, full of doubt, full of fear. I mean, the list goes on. And yet, you dealt so gently with Peter on that beach as he turned behind him and continued living in the same behaviors that you just called him out of. May we look at our future. May we see ourselves as just beginning the journey of following you. Not worried about where we end up, as long as we're next to you. In your Son's name. Look, I know you're more like Peter than maybe you may realize. By the time I just finished my message to this point, you may have forgotten who you're following. So let's go back to John chapter 1, where John started all of this, and read the very person in who we are placing our faith. This is the Jesus who walked on the beach with Peter. The Jesus who told Peter, you follow me. The Jesus who told Peter, do you love me more than everyone else? Do you love me? In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to bear witness about the light, that all might believe through him. He was not the light, but came to bear witness about the light. The true light, which enlightens everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world was made through him, yet the world did not know him. He came to his own, and his own people did not receive him. But to all who did receive him, who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God, who were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we have seen his glory. Glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and full of truth.